Hey everyone, my name's Ray. Cablecast 7.1 is a release I'm really excited about. It's been a long time in the making. So we're going to talk about mostly the new features, especially the new features that are new to 7.1. And then towards the end of the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about how 7.1 brings features that were available in 7.0 for VIO servers, which is the new line of video servers we introduced at last year's NAB, to existing customers that have the last generation Flex server. We'll also talk about how Cablecast CG can be migrated to the last generation of Carousel CG appliances. Then we'll go through the Q&A. But let's first start with the new features. So a big new feature in 7.1 is the management of SSL certificates. So what is an SSL certificate? When you have a web browser, public site or the video on demand player, the live streaming player, and you have a server on the internet that wants to access information over that server, it's really important, especially nowadays, for that communication to be encrypted. There's a couple reasons. It provides better security, so especially for things like passwords. You don't want those being sniffed out at a Wi-Fi when you're at the coffee shop. More importantly, probably for all of you as content providers, is better interoperability. Let's say hosted on WordPress or Squarespace or some other kind of platform, and you want to embed a player, almost all of those sites are going to be served over HTTPS. And nowadays, your content also has to be over HTTPS, or you won't be able to embed your content in those sites. So having SSL built into Cablecast allows for better interoperability with especially things like the public site and the video on demand players. The last thing is better SEO. Starting soon, Google and other major search engines are going to start kind of lowering the page rank for sites that are still served over just HTTP and not HTTPS. It probably won't be a huge difference. You know, for most people, a little bit of page rank isn't going to matter. It's really the e-commerce people and advertisers that really care about those things. But still, it's good to do everything you can to get your visibility on search engines up. And so by serving your content over HTTPS, you won't be dinged for continuing to serve over HTTP. So how does it work? Well, we use a service called Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt is a certificate authority, which means that they issue you certificates. And it's all automatic, and most importantly, it's free. There are some requirements. So for this to work, your primary server, usually your Pro VOD, needs to have TCP ports 80 and 443 accessible from the internet. 80 is so that Let's Encrypt can do what's called an HTTP challenge. And Let's Encrypt is going to be like, okay, well, prove to me you own example.com. And so we'll put like a little secret code at a known location on the Cablecast server, and Let's Encrypt will check that that code matches what they told us to. And if it matches, they'll be like, yep, you own example.com, and we'll give you a certificate for it. And that has to be on port 80. No other port forwards will work. So port 80 has to be accessible. And then 443 is for the HTTPS traffic. So port 80 is for standard HTTP, and port 443 is for secure traffic. So as long as those two ports are open to your public server and you own a domain, you can't generate a certificate for an IP address. So you must have something like mystation.org, example.com. You can't just have a bare naked IP address on the internet. So a couple notable changes before we get into the demo. All the HTTP traffic will be automatically redirected to HTTPS. This is just a best practice. So once you enable the HTTPS traffic on your Cablecast system, if you try to log in at a standard HTTP port, like 80, we'll automatically send you over to the 443 HTTPS. The only thing that we allow through the standard port 80 anymore will be the challenge from Let's Encrypt. This means that if you're on your internal system network and you access it through, like, say, a local IP address, like 10.0.0.1, you'll get a security kind of certificate mismatch. Because you know what you're doing, you can accept that. It's not good to do that, like for your bank, for instance, but it's fine to do it for your kind of internal network stuff. But everyone from a public facing going through your domain name will get a good certificate and get a trusted browser. The other notable change for this is that all the live streams will be streamed through your primary unit. This is because you want to be able to embed those live streams, and we want to expose that certificate. And if you're using something like a port forward for your live streams, we can't guarantee that we can serve those securely. So all your live stream traffic will go through your primary unit. So let's see what this looks like in the Cablecast interface. So if you can see here on my demo system, Cablecast TV, I get a secure lock icon, and that's because my connection is secure. If I go ahead and I look at the certificate, you can see that it was issued by Let's Encrypt Authority X3, and it was actually just done, well, it expires in May. I could look at the details further and figure out when it was done. Let's Encrypt certificates are typically good for about 90 days, and they recommend that you renew them halfway in between. So what your Cablecast system will do is automatically generate the certificate request at the halfway mark, and then Let's Encrypt will issue a new certificate. So what this looks like in the UI is pretty simple. To set this up, you would go to Settings, System Settings, Public Connectivity. And at Public Connectivity, what it will look like, it will just say Enable SSL, and then you can use the Let's Encrypt option. And so you can see here, I have it set to my demo.cablecast TV. I have SSL enabled, and I have Let's Encrypt enabled. And then optionally, Let's Encrypt lets me provide a email address where they'll email me if I haven't renewed my certificate in time. And then we just present you the current certificate status, which is valid, and we last checked it at 10:13 p.m., I think, yesterday. So that's it. You come in, you do a setting, click a box, give your domain name. As long as you own that domain name and you have the proper port forwards, you'll get SSL certificates for free. Really easy to set up in Cablecast. Awesome. So moving on, the next thing I'd like to talk about that's new in 7.1 is sidecar files for closed captioning. So what is a sidecar file? A sidecar file is a closed caption file that just contains closed captions. It doesn't contain any video or audio. Why would you want to use a sidecar file for closed caption? The biggest reasons are that they're pretty common now. Lots of products, including Enco's Encaption software, Telestream Caption Maker, and other things produce either SCC or MCC sidecar files. What this is good for is it makes it really easy to add captions to existing video without figuring out how to mux those captions or transcode the video or figure out the exact right format to mix and match containers with captions. It's also a lot faster because it's just a small text file that contains only captions. It's really easy to put that on your server with your video file instead of having to do the whole transcode step. It's also faster to replace the captions if there was a mistake. So a lot of times you'll get a caption file that was just live or machine generated, and then someone might go back through and edit it later to fix spelling mistakes or incorrect words. And with a sidecar file, you can just easily swap the file and not have to re-encode or transcode the video. So the specifics for sidecar support, we support two types of common sidecar files. One is the Mac caption format. This is 708 captions, and it's generated by, say, Telestream software, or another common source of MCC files is the Blackmagic Hyperdeck. When it records a file, it lays down an MCC file that contains closed captions if there's closed captions present on the SDI signal. The other type of file that we support is SCC. This contains 608 data or SD closed caption. You can use either type of file for either HD or SD. What happens is 708 is the HD format. It contains a reserved space for 608 data, for SD data. Most people in English-speaking countries like the United States are really just doing 608 captions. It's not until you get into Asian language support or really weird characters that you start getting the need for 708 captions. And 608 captions are required to be part of the 708 payload. So even if you're taking an S08 file and downscaling it to SD, we're just gonna rip out the 608 part and pass that along. So how this works in Cablecast is the file will have the same exact name as the source file, just with the different extension. So if we see 1.mpeg and a 1.scc file next to it will automatically use that 1.scc file for closed captions whenever 1.mpeg is played. So what this looks like in Cablecast. So if I bring over one of my servers, I have to escape from the presentation. So here's one of my VIO servers. And in the content drive, I have a Democracy Now! File along with an SCC file for the closed captions. For anyone that's not aware, Democracy Now! Puts broadcast versions of their files available at democracynow.org/static. Those are there almost every day. And they always give a closed caption sidecar file that's an SCC file. And so if you download both the, say, the 1080 HD version and the SCC sidecar file, you can put that on your Cablecast server. They'll have to have the same name just for the different extensions. And then in Cablecast, we up that sidecar file and note it as compatible captions are present in the file. And whenever you play that file, we'll automatically play the closed captions with it. All right, that's it for sidecar files. So let's talk about IP video. So the next big thing in 7.1 is we've redone our network streaming stack. Back in 6.3, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we introduced RTP support in the Flex servers. While some people found it great, it was a little bit cumbersome, hard to use, required some hardware licenses to even enable support for it. So it's not widely adopted. What we did was we took upon what worked with the RTP, but then replaced it with a more flexible library to do a lot more. And we added support for IP formats. So why do you want to use IP? Well, number one is the flexibility. It allows you to take sources just using existing IT infrastructure. So say you add a new studio to your facility, it's going to have networking because everything has networking, but you wouldn't have to wire it up for baseband video. You could just put a RTP broadcast stream on your IT network and be able to pick that up in your Cablecast system, no problem. So the other really exciting thing is new content sources. There's lots of streams available now that are available online. For instance, we have customers that have been playing around with free speech TV over an HLS feed, or one customer found the HLS stream for Classic Art Showcase. I can't say that you're allowed to use any of these HLS streams, but they're there, they're online. If you get permission from the copyright holder, the content licensor, you could use those streams in your Cablecast system without having to have, say, an expensive satellite system. The other really exciting use for IP streams is remote production. If you want to go live from a town hall or from a sports event, if you have the way to get the signal over the internet back to your system, you can pull it into your VIO server without any additional equipment. You just need the network stream. You'll need equipment at the event, an encoder of some sort, but your video server can handle decoding. So with all the excitement with IP, let's just remember that it's not without peril. Networks fail. We've all had issues with spotty Wi-Fi. People having my audio right now during this presentation. So it's hard. Video is also hard. We test a lot of video streams, but they're all unique. And sometimes we find ones that are excitingly different that surprise us. And really the most important thing is you don't want to find those things out the moment of a big production. So we definitely recommend when starting to adopt IP streams that you test before under controlled circumstances, meaning that if you're going to go live from a football game, the biggest football game of the year, test the encoder, test the cellular connection or the network that you're going to have at the football game that day. Things will still go wrong sometimes, but it will be less surprising if you realize 2 days ahead of time that the network jack at the sports center doesn't work and you have to find some other network connection than trying to figure that out 5 minutes before the game starts. So specifics on network streaming, we'll still support RTP. We've added support for RTSP, RTMP, HLS, and then through HLS YouTube Live. YouTube Live is in beta quotes, meaning that technically it is, you're not supposed to take YouTube live streams and do anything with them outside of YouTube's players, but we realize that it's a really exciting thing to be able to do. We don't think YouTube is going to come after any public access station for doing this type of thing, but you should have the content license for the content at a minimum, and there's some technical restrictions on doing the YouTube Live. If you can do any of the other methods like HLS or RTMP, I highly recommend doing those because they don't violate a YouTube terms of service. So specifics continued. We don't have direct capture support yet on the VIO system. All these different network streams are kind of different, and there's no common container that can support all of them. So we can't just capture the network stream directly to the server. You need to play it out, and then you could re-encode it on the server's encoder. Like I talked about a second ago, the YouTube Live support is beta, meaning that YouTube could break it at any time. It's not something that they are like asking us to do. It's something we made work, and they might, do what they do to make it not work at some future time. It requires the stream be embeddable. So in YouTube, when setting up a live stream, there's an option to make the stream embeddable on other sites. If that setting is not selected for a stream, and you have to be the owner of the stream to change that setting, then the YouTube servers will block us from trying to get the content. And then finally, the RTMP support requires a third-party RTMP server. So Cablecast can't directly accept an RTMP stream. And the reason for this is that RTMP has a encoder client viewer model, and those are supported by a server in the middle. So your VIO server or Flex server will act as a viewer to an RTMP stream. The encoder will act as an encoder that pushes up to a server, and then your Cablecast equipment will need to act as a viewer and view that content. So a common RTMP server is Wowza. So let's get into the demo and see how some of the new network streams work. So if we go into the settings, system settings, settings, location settings, in the IO, there's a network stream section. And in that network stream section, you can see all the different streams that we have set up on this system. So we have a couple of YouTubes and a free speech. We also have another Cablecast stream. So this is Your Town TV, which is one of our demo systems. It's its live streams address. When you're creating a new stream, you just give it a name. Select the type of stream. So for example, if I wanted to do an HLS stream, and then I just give it the link to that stream. And then I can save it. Playing a network stream, I can do one of two ways. I can either force it directly. So say if I go to my force matrix and I want to play that stream, I can hit the action button, play a stream, and then choose that network stream from the drop-down list. So for right now, I'll play Your Town TV. And then this will take a few seconds because we have to buffer or start downloading the stream. But once the stream is buffered a little bit, we'll start playing it live. And you'll see in a second, it's going to switch over to Your Town TV. So this is actually our other Cablecast demo systems live stream playing a carousel bulletin board right now. And you can see the streaming icon shows us that we're playing Your Town TV. Go ahead and switch us back to bulletin board. The other way to play a network stream is a scheduled event like any other Cablecast show. So when you're in your show record, creating a new show, you would just create a live show like you'd create any other, but from your formats, you would choose network stream. And then you can choose the stream that you want to play in this dropdown. So if I wanted to play classic arts for an hour, that's all I would have to do. And then I can save and schedule that at any other time. The only thing to be worried about when you're doing network streams as scheduled events, if it's kind of like a special event live production, you want to make sure that the encoder at the location is going and streaming before Cablecast would schedule to take from it. So for kind of special event stuff, what we've seen a lot of our customers do is they use force events to start the program once they've confirmed with someone that the stream is actually running. For other types of things like replacing Democracy Now! With Free Speech HLS or playing the classic art stream, we've seen people just schedule them as shows because those streams are almost always running 24/7. So last new feature that I want to talk about is system archives. So unfortunately, computers fail. And when they do, it's nice to be able to get them back up and running quickly. So we added a feature. This is primarily driven by some updates that we did recently. We wanted to make it really easy for our support techs to be able to restore a system from a backup without having to kind of manually do a bunch of repetitive steps. So we decided to bake it into the product. And so what happens is every night, each one of your Cablecast systems will create an archive of most of the important files on the system. So this includes databases, your Cablecast CG and Carousel media files, some configuration files, etc. And it will back them up to the local system drive, or more importantly, the content drive if it's a video server or like a VOD server. And it'll get that on a separate drive than the drive that all the files are contained on. The backups are created nightly, and what's important is that they're a single self-contained file. So they're kind of easy to move around if you have to. And then we have tools that our support techs can use to then restore that to a machine. So if anyone on this call has gone through our Windows update process, this is what the image that we were using would do automatically. After the image was complete, it would take the backup file that was created and restore it to a machine. Right now, the only place where we can put those is on the content drive. It's in a folder called CTRMS Backups. If you have some sort of NAS or other backup strategy, we highly recommend using these archive files instead. As we add new important files to Cablecast, these archives will contain those files. It's a little bit easier to tell it to only back up this stuff. And with the tools that we have, our support techs can restore these files really easily should something happen, like a power failure, lightning strike, fire. So if you have copies of these archive files, we do plan in the future of being able to push these to other locations if needed, or at least distribute them amongst all the machines so that you have multiple copies of them in case one machine does spontaneously catch fire. But for right now, they get stored to the content drive of that machine. And so if you have some strategy for backing them up, we highly recommend backing up these files. And what this looks like in the software is under System Settings, you'll have System Archives, and we'll just give a report. Now this screenshot, this server's been up and running since last week, so it has a full week of full backups for all the systems. But it will just give you a little details about the file itself and where it is on that server. And so we keep 7 days worth of backups. Support tech could configure that if you have space issues with storing, like on this system, a 7 gig backup. So the system archives should be really neat. We hope to improve it in the future so that it'll be really easy for everyone to kind of make complete backups of their system. One important note is this doesn't back up your content drive. There's not a way that we could take all the content on your system, terabytes of content, and back that up to a single file. If you want to do content backups, we highly recommend using like some third-party solution that can intelligently back up that content. So the next thing I want to talk about, the last two things, are the upgrades for existing customers that have our last generation products. So first up, Flex servers. So what we did was we wrote a new control module that takes all the great new features in the VIO, like the thumbnail confidence monitoring, the additional like file support for scaling and codecs, and brings that to the the Flex servers. So your Flex server now has all the features that are part of the VIO, except for the integrated CG. That's the only feature that we're not bringing back. So anything that relies on the integrated CG or Cablecast CG in the video server, like squeezebacks, for example, those won't come back to Flex servers. But everything else, the confidence monitoring, improved file support, the web-based channel branding, and the H.264 encoding all come to your Flex servers. When it comes time to upgrade, your equipment must be licensed by a Tightrope staff as part of the upgrade. This can happen at any time before the upgrade. And if you do that licensing step, the installer will automatically upgrade a licensed Flex server to the appropriate control module set to enable these features. The installer has an option for when you do upgrade. If you don't want to upgrade your Flex server, there is an option to stay on the old support set. And there's reasons why you might want to do that. And so those are encode codec support. So for licensing issues, primarily with Apple, the new control module set that we wrote only has support for H.264 and MPEG-2 encoding. Specifically, this means we don't have the ability on the new control module sets to encode Apple ProRes. So if you want to continue encoding ProRes files on your Flex server, you'll need to stay on the legacy code base. For the few people that have enabled the RTP support on the Flex servers, we don't have network stream capture yet in the new control module. So if you want to just directly capture an RTP stream to disk without playing it out, that would be another reason to stay on the legacy support. The other thing is if you just don't like change and you want to keep your server the way it is, but you want some of the other like UI features, you can just keep it on the current Flex support if you want to. When you run the installer on your Flex server, if you want to stay on the legacy code base, you would just use this checkbox. It's under the advanced options. If you don't click that, it will automatically update. So by default, as long as your system is licensed by support staff before your 7.1 update, you'll get all the new Cablecast video server features. Finally, let's talk about Cablecast CG just a bit. So we're bringing back Cablecast CG to the CG 340 hardware. This allows running Cablecast CG on an older Carousel CG 340 player. The big reason to do this is the improved video playback. The Cablecast CG uses the same video engine as the Cablecast VIO and Flex servers, which means it has much better support for things like back-to-back video. If you've used Carousel for a while, you'll know it takes a bit to load in between videos. So if you have two videos back-to-back, you'll get long periods of black on the screen. And that goes away in Cablecast CG. The videos just switch seamlessly. The other big noticeable thing, just for people that are already on VIOs or Cablecast CG, is in 7.08, we released support for line-in audio using USB devices. That's also part of this release. So just so everyone knows, if you upgrade to 7.1, you can start using line-in audio. And the main reason to start using Cablecast CG on your older Carousel CG 340 hardware is it's future ready. Any features that we add to Cablecast CG, you'll be able to do with those players. Big caveat here is you can't do a squeeze back with a CG 340 player because your video server and your CG aren't the same machine. They don't have access to the same video. But other Cablecast CG features that we're working on, like the improved video playback, and there's a bunch of stuff in the works. Those all come back to your existing Carousel CG 340 players. When you want to install on a standalone Cablecast CG, there's just an option in the Cablecast installer to install a standalone CG player. You'll get something that looks very familiar to a Carousel player, but it's actually Cablecast CG. One last thing about Cablecast CG is it doesn't really change anything about the player itself. You still need the scan converter and the convert DVI. The last thing is that Cablecast CG doesn't support some Carousel features currently. So live video bulletins aren't supported at the moment. Video block bulletins aren't supported. Those are both features that we're working on. And the final thing is interactive bulletins. We don't support putting a web page in your CG output. So if you're highly reliant on any of those features, you should probably choose to stay on Carousel for the time being. How do you get 7.1? Well, a software assurance is required. If you're not sure if you have software assurance or want to find out or talk to someone about getting it, I highly recommend reaching out to sales at Cablecast TV. If you're 100% sure that you have a software assurance contract, you can contact support at Cablecast TV to get on the kind of rollout list with an update key and to schedule us to license your system to enable those 7.1 features on your video servers?
Thank you all for joining us. And like Ray said, you can contact support or sales, depending on where you're at with your assurance contracts, to follow up on getting this exciting new release.